Today, I'm speaking with Ron Tite. Ron is the founder of the marketing agency Church and State, as well as an author of 2 books, most recently Think, Do, Say, and a professional keynote speaker. Hope you enjoy the chat. All right, Ron, thanks for doing this.
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you. All right, so let's jump right into it. For our listeners, maybe you could give a brief bio of yourself so that give us context for the conversation.
Sure. Well, I was born in 1970, June 13th, specifically. A little faster, a little more. Okay.
Yeah, I think we want to finish this up within 10 hours. So
got it. Okay. So I'm the founder and chief creative officer of Church and State. It's an agency based in Toronto. I'm an author of 2 books, and I do about 70 keynotes a year, mostly around North America. I kind of refuse most international stuff, but occasionally I'll pop over to the other side of the pond and do stuff over there.
Nice. Great. Well, we were talking before this, and I just wanted to jump right into where we were, because I think it's really interesting. So I wrote a document called How I Work at Goobagoo. And I published it for the entire company. And I got this idea from the book, I believe, The Effective Executive, which basically described how nonsensical it is to work with people and not know how they work, how they view their strengths and their weaknesses, how they want to do meetings and all this stuff, and how rare it is for that to kind of happen where people articulate how they like to work. And so you were kind of describing how you've handled that in Church and State. So I thought it would be interesting to just to riff on that for a bit.
Yeah, it's I didn't I think we all have custom kind of personalized ways in which we operate. We use different software. We have different defaults, like of even just this Zoom or Teams, or we all have stuff that's we're comfortable in, and you can put stuff in place that is kind of procedural and policy based for entire organizations, but that can be really tricky for people. So we have one rule at the agency, which is I'm not allowed to talk money. I'm just not allowed to raise prices, and so there's 2 of us who have equity in the business, and you would think that I should be able to have those conversations, but I'm the one who said, like, no, don't let me talk about that, because it's just not something I fundamentally know the importance of that, but it's just not something that I'm overly passionate about, curious about, or committed to enough. I'm really kind of focused on product, so I just do not allow myself, and our team knows they don't allow me to have those conversations.
How do you let the team know this? Like, how do you publish a doc, or like when someone new comes into the company, let's say, like, how do they learn the sort of the ways of doing things?
Well, Roger Martin has a great line, which is, culture is the inner playbook that says, this is how we do things around here. Mm-hmm. And so while we do a formalized onboarding session, I think a lot of those, this is how we really operate, that's a part of culture. And culture happens organically within organizations. And it's those kind of, the old pre-pandemic water cooler talk of when it's actually not you telling everybody, but it's them telling each other.
Often you don't know, like many people kind of don't even know, like, oh, Ryan's like this. This is how he works. I mean, we try.
100%.
Some of us are better than others and more introspective about like understanding how we behave and what our values are. But most people, like, it's better heard from the people who are observing the behavior, right? Like the team. Yeah. Yeah,
totally. Yeah. I kind of, so I let that happen, but people also know I'm pretty open and self-aware about it, that if somebody doesn't know or it hasn't been said, I'll say, hey, Nate, you're new here. I don't know if you know this, but I'm not allowed to talk money, right? Okay, good.
Right.
I think it does make you a better leader. The only thing I think that is challenging about dictating it, right? Of like, this is how I work. Like, if you want to come see me, I don't know what was in your doc, but I think though that as long as it you still have the mindset that it has to be a two-way street, where there certainly has to be the respect of the hierarchy of the organization, where it's like, well, someone's time needs to be spent in different ways. And so you need to kind of ladder up to interact with them in these ways. As long as the leader also knows that, like, oh, you know what, this person needs real-time feedback. And so, and this person doesn't. They want it in their monthly review or something. Those people, I think there's an intimidation factor with looking up in the organization, and they'll never dictate that to you. They'll never send you a doc that says, hey, I report to somebody 3 levels below you, but just so you know, I prefer these meetings.
It's harder. Also, it's probably harder for people to do it when they're not like leaders in the organization, I suppose, because there is this element of kind of I suppose perception that you're dictating how work is supposed to be. But I think there's, as with anything, there's a nuance to it, right? Where
100%.
It has to be helpful, and the purpose of the document is to help people work with you better, not necessarily to dictate how they should work, especially if that is not a way that is natural to them, right? Like
they want to know. They want to know. They don't want to waste time. They don't want to be ineffective. So I think it's a great idea to go, this is how I work best.
You omitted a very interesting fact from your bio, which is your life in comedy, I think perhaps pre-church and state. And a lot of leaders, I've seen a lot of leaders in tech and business have come from comedy. There's Dick Costello from Twitter was, I think, stand-up or improv, had a history there. The guy from Dollar Shave Club was in comedy. What is it about comedy that produces or helps people be great leaders?
Well, first of all, there's different types of comedy, which, improv is one sort of thing. Stand-up is a very solo experience. Sketch is really a collaborative environment. And I think there are the elements of each in each format. So a great stand-up has elements that are completely improvised. And, somebody like Eddie Murphy, who is a quote unquote stand-up, or was in his heyday, but really he was like a one-man sketch troupe with characters and stuff. So there's different formats, but I think generally across the board, what makes comedians great for business, one is that great comedians are just observers of human truth. That you'll know that an audience will say like, oh, it's funny because it's true. Yes, that somebody has taken an observer's role in society, is seeing what's happening, and is seeing the peculiarities of it, is seeing the uniqueness of it, the randomness, like whatever it is, sees that there's something out of sort with that, like that, and like, why does that happen? Or I feel this way when that happens. And there's a way of kind of being open to seeing it and open to interpreting it and expressing your reaction to it. That's really all that stand-up is.
So people are so compelled by this, right? And I think that that's probably why in business they're compelled by people who speak authentically. They tell it like it is, and they can make these observations that other people are like, oh yeah, like that's why I'm having this pain point with my product or whatever it is, right? Or that's why our culture is fucked up, or and so what is it? People are so compelled. It's like they had blindfold on and you kind of remove the blindfold and now they can see, and they're like, thank you. They're like, I want to follow you, right? This is good.
There's the George Carlin line was, my job as a stand-up is to make you laugh at the things you forgot to the first time around. Like you or something like that. Or you forgot to laugh at the first time, which is, that's all it is. Like, oh yeah, I thought that, but I didn't see that it was funny until you pointed it out to me. And so it's just about insight. That's all it is. It's about insight. So, but insight on its own is kind of useless, right? It's that, because every stand-up could go, what's the deal with the thing on the airplane? Well, that is not what makes people laugh. It's what connects you to them. It's where they go, oh, what's he? Yeah, I know that thing. I've been there. What is it? And you'll kind of land an insight that makes them think, but it's where you take the insight that really dictates their reaction to it. And you can kind of spin it, and it's kind of you get into these kind of comedy constructs of like the rule of three and kind of hyperbole and all that kind of stuff.
Also,
so it's
which
like
are effective in business. I mean, rule of three, I'm using presentations all the time, right?
Yeah,
I didn't even know
100%.
I didn't even know there was a comedy thing.
Yeah, it's a comedy thing that because you go, you establish a premise or an insight. You go, here's the first thing, here's the second thing. So you establish a pattern, and the audience goes, oh, this is based on that pattern. It's going to be the third thing. And then you go, zing, no, it's not. And you surprise them with something that's shocking or something that's interesting or something that's just downright funny. And that's where the comedy comes from. And so it's got this path of insight, first choice, second choice, into the third.
The third is surprising. Is this the surprise?
Comedy is surprising. You're like, oh, I didn't expect you to say that, because you established the pattern to establish my expectations.
Right.
And I go, zing, no, it's not that. So that's kind of one element I think is really important in business. But I think the other part that's really important that stand-ups do really well, and I'll teach people down at Heroic Public Speaking in New Jersey on this thing called Finding the Funny, which is like, how do you kind of integrate humor into your speeches? And the rule there is, you pan for silver, but you work for gold. That gold material, gold comedy, doesn't just present itself. You kind of will see something, you think, oh, there's something there, there's something really interesting there. So you pan for silver, and then you work it until you get to gold. You do it over and over and over and over and over again. You build the nuance in, you find the beats, you understand where the pivot is, you perfect the punchline, like you understand the character who's leading that dialogue, like all those things, those don't just come out. So in what the average consumer sees is a Netflix special. What they don't see is the year of road work that the stand-up has done in perfecting all of that material to the point that it's ready to be filmed and deployed as a special. And this is, as somebody who comes from, kind of the technology space of this is kind of going of whether it's the pivot from a specific business into something else, but it's just like incremental improvements into different versions of software or an app.
Yeah.
That's how you get
with
better.
Anything. I mean, it's life as well. I mean, if you're trying to build any type of skill, the best way to do, you're not going to be good overnight. It doesn't matter if it's you're building a new product, your first product. I can't remember who said it, but your first product, if you, I think it was Reid Hoffman, LinkedIn, said, if you are not embarrassed by your first product, version 1, whatever, you launched too late.
Right.
The idea being that you got to launch and quick start as fast as possible, and then iterate and learn how to improve, because nobody's doing that in the lab. You need to get stuff out in the wild. You need to let it breathe, let people react to it. And there's just no other way. And then if you're building a skill, you just do something every day. That's what I always say, is like, even if you're, if it's exercise, I'm like relearning how to type right now.
Yeah.
So I bought this keyboard that kind of like forces me to learn, and like, you can't have any bad habits. And so I'm literally doing typing exercises, and amazing. I'm just doing like 30 minutes a day, at least every day. Right. So, that's the element people don't see. Right. Like you're saying.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But there's kind of two sides. Like, one is the incremental improvement approach, but the other part is that I'll often use this kind of metaphor of assembly line versus concept car. Like, that's how every task should be either assembly line or concept car. So assembly line is you're doing something the exact same way every single time, and you're removing all the inefficiencies of it. So that's what incremental improvement is in a comedy bit, is you're removing all the inefficiencies where you're losing the ums and the ers, and you're pulling out all that stuff to make it the most efficient joke as possible. And then once you've got it, You assembly line that shit. You do it over and over and over and over and over again, the exact same way. And there's this belief that, especially in speaking, where it's like, oh, I don't want to, that's not very authentic. It's like, what? No, my good friend Michael Port told me this. He's like, if you know that you have there is an exact way to deliver that insight, which is it is the best way to do it. How dare you not do it that way for an audience? And just because you want to be a little bit more authentic. Be a pro and act like it's the first time you're saying it, so you don't lose that authenticity. But if you're the pro and you know that that's the exact way to do it, how dare you pulling your full fee and not doing it in that specific way?
Yeah,
people,
you're doing a disservice. You're doing a disservice to the audience, right?
Yeah,
you're robbing
100%.
the audience of doing it that way. Speaking of practice, you've written 2 books. Most recently, Think, Do, Say. You articulate in your book, Think, Do, Say, that consumers have lost trust, and you even describe, you refer to it as a post-truth age, which I really liked. And to me, any problem like this creates opportunity for companies, for people and their personal brand, whatever it is. And I think this crisis creates a tremendous opportunity. How do you think brands should go about building trust and I don't want to say taking advantage, but capitalizing on the opportunity to stand out as trustworthy? Well,
based on that, the thinking that went into that, it really is about aligning those 3 things. It is about aligning what you fundamentally believe in. But that's not enough, having something that you believe in, because you will be defined by your actions. And so your actions need to be expected and fulfilling, that they need to fulfill something. They can't just be random acts. So they have to reinforce what you fundamentally believe. So this is what I fundamentally believe. This is what I do to reinforce that consistently over time. And then this is how I talk about it. And when you combine all those 3 things, that helps kind of deliver growth. It helps deliver trust in the long run. I think one of the crises from a marketing perspective is that too many people are going, we got to cut through the clutter, and that's easy. Like, that is easy. Drop an F-bomb in a social post a naked picture. Like, it's very easy to cut through. Very
again, the
easy
element, the element of surprise again, right?
Well, no, it's not that. It's that you can just become incredibly inappropriate. If cutting through is your only metric, kill a puppy. You will cut through. Like, you'll cut through the noise. Trust me.
Kill the
and
puppy.
People go, oh, we don't want to do that.
That's the name of the
next yeah, kill puppy. But so it's like, so it's not that. Then you don't just want to cut through. You want to cut through and build trust in the long run. And the reason you want to build trust, it's not because this isn't recreational business. This isn't just about being nice. It's because it makes your sales pitch more efficient as time goes on, because your loyal customers are more loyal because they can trust you. You get a reputation for actually delivering on what you promise. So therefore, there's less hesitation in buying your product. I mean, you have a more efficient sales cycle. You have a lower sales cost. All that stuff. So yes, you definitely want to drive trust. So if the thinking part is like having a fundamental purpose of something you believe in, but not something. And we've lost it on this a little bit, where people are like, oh, I need to have a purpose. Therefore, I believe that we should save the planet. It's like, what? You make Tupperware containers, or you're just picking a cause.
Yeah.
That is not corporate purpose. Yeah. Corporate purpose is believing in something that goes beyond the thing you sell, but that is strategically linked to the thing you sell. So it's like, we believe this, so we do this. And if those 2 don't connect, you're just picking causes. So it's having a purpose that is tied to what you sell. Secondly, you will be defined by your actions. And why does that deliver trust? Oh, now if I know what you fundamentally believe in, it's this test. And you go, oh, they actually live up to it. So now I know I can predict how they're going to behave, because they do live it on a daily basis, and not just in the boardroom. I'm talking every single frontline employee understands what they believe in and the role that that frontline employee has to bring it to life. So it's a consistent experience for the consumer. That decreases cognitive load. Now it's like, oh, I don't have to question it. I don't have to say, can you send me testimonials? Like none of that stuff. I just know that consistently you deliver. And then the last part is like, well, how do I, even if I believe in something and I actually live it, there are too many people who use their communication channels to just overly pitch. And it's like, your communication isn't really aligned with what you believe because you're just going for the sale all the time. And I don't trust that you actually have my interests at heart. You just want the sale, or you just want to sound perfect because your language is so scripted. It's got all the buzzwords and everything else. I don't trust you because I've heard that script a million times before. And if you sound like all those other organizations who have let me down, I'm just going to assume that you're in that group. So I need you to speak to me in a really authentic voice that really represents something that you are. And when you combine all three of those things, you drive growth and you build trust.
To re-articulate that, build what your purpose is and in your values and how you're going to operate, then sort of produce the machine that's going to be able to live and do the things that align with that, and then say it in a authentic way, right?
Yeah.
And I believe that, at the end of the day, people are selling to people. And so people want to be talked to as people, and nobody wants that. I mean, if you look at just LinkedIn, the DMs and all the content is just like, you would never talk to your friend that way, right? Like it's all corporate speak, and that ultimately turns people off. It doesn't resonate.
Right.
And I think that in this age of post-truth, I often come back to the book, The Speed of Trust. I don't know if you're familiar with that book, but it's,
no, I don't know that one.
It's Stephen
But it sounds
Covey's,
like I should have read it before I wrote Think to Say.
Stephen Covey's son, like 7
Oh,
Habits.
okay. Yeah.
Right? Anyway, it all comes down to the idea is that as trust goes up, speed goes up. So if we trust a brand or we trust someone, we can make decisions really fast, right? We can use that as a heuristic. And he says that there's two components to trust. One is competence. Can you do the thing that you said you're going to do, right? Do I trust that you're going to get it done? And the second is character. Do you have like is your heart in the right place? Do you have my interest in mind, and so forth?
Yeah.
But everyone says that they're the best, the fastest, the best value. And so in order to stand out, you really need to get off of that script, I think, in my opinion. But
yeah, because I mean, you can poke fun at it. You can make the statement and be authentic at the same time, right? Like you're like, we're the best in the business, or at least that's what my mother says. Like there's a way of being authentic about delivering those stereotypical messages.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a great scene from There's Something About Mary. And when Ben Stiller picks up Harlan Williams, and it was as a hitchhiker, and he says, "Hey, what do you do?" And Harlan Williams goes, "You ever hear the 8-minute abs?" And he goes, "Yeah." And he's like, "Well, I created the 7-minute abs." And he's like, "Well, what are you going to do when someone comes up with the 6-minute abs?" And he's like, "Dude, you can't get a good workout in 6 minutes." But
I can get it in 7. But I can get it in 7.
But I love that example, right? Because it's just so ridiculously easy to go, no, we're the fastest. No, we've got now more value.
Yeah.
And when you look at
the best.
Yeah. And there's some categories, like if you look at the mobile phone category, like there's been a Freedom Mobile, whatever, like those newer kind of players. And I'm not cutting up the agency who did the work, because I know it's a big collection of people involved. But if you really want to stand out, and what we're going to do is we're going to come out with an offer around how many minutes we get or how many gigs of data we get, what our downloads are. Like, what? This really functioning thing that's way too confusing. It's used by everybody in the industry. I now need like a cost comparison chart of who's got what minutes and data and blah blah blah, all these kind of things, these really functional things. And at the end of the day, I actually don't know. I don't know how much data I need. I don't know the use of my phone. What, I have no idea. The only thing that works for me is unlimited.
Yeah. The thing that's striking me here is the Steve Jobs iPod presentation, and really every presentation that he did. He knew that people didn't care about how many gigs were on the iPod. Like, they didn't even know what that meant. What was the tagline? What was the thing we remember 20 years later? 1,000 songs in your pocket.
Yeah.
It's just brilliant. The simplicity of it and selling the benefit, not the feature. But so many people want to sell features. I mean, I see it all the time. It's like, we have this feature and that feature. Here's the sales deck. Make sure we have all of our features in the sales deck. And let's just go right into it and puke all our features throughout the whole time. No discovery, no benefits. Just, I mean, so... But
now there is an argument, though, right? That and I totally agree with you that is, for most consumers, that is the way that, like, they suffer from infobesity. They've got way too much information at their disposal. They need something simple. They need to see outcome and benefit over functions and features. But I was the creative director on Dell, and there is a segment of the population that's really, really knowledgeable, and they do want to compare speeds and feeds. And it's just a smaller section of society. And, Dell was so different from Apple. And while they're not they haven't achieved the success that Apple has achieved, but it's Dell, they've done well. It's not like they were the startup that went away. Like, they have done remarkably well. And so they were bound by purpose, which was, no one should pay for something they don't need. That if you don't need, 500 megs of RAM, then you should not pay for that.
So you could build your own computer. This was
you should build your own thing,
right? Yeah.
And so Dell would say, we did full page ads with all these configs of, like, this is what you can get and all these things for this price. And those who are really knowledgeable, and they may not even have gone through the configs with a fine-tooth comb, but because the brand was, you shouldn't pay for what you need, there was trust in that, and they bought by the package, even though they didn't look at the configs. But they loved that it was there because they thought that it was a way of showing honesty and transparency. And so there is a certain section of the population who will think that way and want to see that detail. I think it's really just trying to focus in on who is the sweet spot for your particular brand.
It's really important that brands express their values in ways that can translate into business success. We've obviously seen recently brands become entangled in political situations, right? There was Disney, Bud Light was obviously had a disastrous business outcomes recently. And so how do you think companies should think about their moral imperative with respect to politics and social issues? How should they navigate this seemingly minefield with respect to it?
Well, there's a couple of things. One, it's not that they should express their values, is that they should live their values, right? Like that, I shouldn't read your values. I should experience your values, and I experience your values through your actions and the actions of your people. So that's first and foremost. A lot of organizations have spent a lot of time writing them and not enough time living them, and or setting up their structure in a way that rewards people who live them or who reinforce, like all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So like on the front lines, actually, when I'm dealing with customer service or the buying experience, like I've been in the Apple store and have terrible experiences, or I've had, bad experiences with customer service at other brands that are, big brands and probably should be doing better, right? Is that where living your values often is expressed to the consumer?
Yeah, I think like one, we write them in a way that's like, oh, an an MBA wrote this, or senior
Right.
management wrote this, but the cashier is kind of going, yeah, but what am I supposed to do?
Right.
I want to live that, but what the hell does authenticity mean to me as a cashier?
Hmm.
Like, so show me how I can live those
Yeah, you need to
values.
build the machine that's actually going to, going to produce the behavior that's aligned with those values. Another good example is Ritz-Carlton. So Ritz-Carlton, they give, I don't know if it's, I can't remember the exact amount. It's like $1,000 or $2,000 per diem to employees to solve any customer problem without going to a manager.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know what the amount is.
Yeah, something like that. It doesn't really matter, right?
Yeah,
The
yeah.
amount doesn't matter. The fact is that people are enabled to make a decision that's in the best interest of the customer to keep the relationship strong with the brand, and they don't have to go and manage. They don't have to think. They don't have to be like, oh, is this an issue that I should use it on or not use it on or whatever? Their mandate is to use it and make the customer's experience remarkable and memorable, and so these are the types of things. You can't just say it. You actually need to do things that are going to enable the people that are stewards of that value to execute.
Yeah. And even then, right, they need to be shown. Like, this is where stories become really important, where you have to have a methodology of like, here's how you tell stories. Inside the organization, stories are shared, they are collected, they are distributed, because they still may not. I go like, I'm empowered to do it, but I still don't know what that means. And then if I go, oh my, I heard that Tommy, somebody checked in late and they were able to go and get them a fresh pillow or like whatever the heck the thing is. I was like, oh, so I just continually see these examples of people living up to the values. That inspires me to do it and also gives me guidance on what to do. What I love about the Ritz-Carlton example is not only have they put all that in place, but their brand mantra, which I think is one of the best, is ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen, which is like they've elevated the status of their team on par with the client, with the customer. It's like, you're just as important as you are ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen, and there is honor in doing these things to elevate their experience. And when you elevate their experience, you elevate your experience. So that's kind of, we need those things.
Storytelling. It's so like, it strikes me just talking about this, how important it is within everything. I mean, if you can level up your career, you can level up your company. If you are a good storyteller, it's magic, right? You can compel people to feel things that either you want them to feel. You can conjure emotions in people. And so like, let's say I'm a CEO, I'm a leader at a company, a VP, whatever, and I write down our values, that's not enough, right? I need to continually tell the story of how we behave and motivate people, and to do the things that and be the types of people that we want them to be, right? And inspire them. Really inspire, I think, is probably the best word to describe it. What are the core, what are the main attributes of good storytelling, and how can people be better storytellers?
Well, I think there's and I can't remember the book that it was featured in, but it was, there's the 3 stories you tell, right? There's the stories you tell your clients and your prospects, those external stories. There's the stories you tell each other, which builds culture. And then there's the story that you tell yourself as an individual. And we tell ourselves story all the time. Oh, you're not good enough. And oh, you're such an idiot and you're irresponsible, all that kind of stuff.
Or we tell the story about someone else to ourselves. Oh, that person, was an asshole, or
they don't deserve that success. Like, what did they do? So those 3 are the 3 types. Now, when you're telling external stories, you can do it. Like, you remember The Usual Suspects, when the director and writer Bryan Singer and Chris McQuarrie were at Sundance on the previous movie they made before that, and they were showing that movie, and somebody said, "What's your next movie about?" And McQuarrie said, All I know is that our next movie is about 5 guilty criminals who meet in the same police lineup. And most people are like, that doesn't occur. And the reason he said that is because he had that visual of the poster, right, of the 5 guilty criminals in the same police lineup. And people are like, that doesn't happen. 5, it's always 1 guilty person and 4 innocent people. 5 people, it's impossible. And all he said was, no, I just need to write the story that gets me there. And which is what he did. He wrote the story of all these pieces coming together so that he could land in a place. So one, we can use story to get us to this destination, especially when we're talking about prospects. We can go like, if you want to get here, here's how you're going to get. So I'm going to say, picture it. It's 2026, Ryan. You're waking up. You're in your house, right? And you just tell the story to get you to that destination.
This is like begin with the end in mind is what's striking.
Yeah, totally.
There, right? Yeah.
So that's one, because it's really compelling about a place you need to get to. And then they're really powerful when you're saying, I could say to you, you know, Ryan, 65% of Canadian taxpayers, blah, 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 blah. Or I could say, you know what? I know a guy, his name's Jimmy Robinson. And Jimmy Robinson is a short little guy. He's got this weird accent, you know, and then I've made this person real. And what you might find is I craft that story. It's a real story about a real person. And when I can use the names, I can. And where there's privacy concerns, I don't. There was this guy, this family. And Ryan, they were in the same position as you, married with 3 kids, living in Toronto. And they had a concern, and they shared a concern that you have. And so what I told them was, if you do these 3 things, and what they encountered along the way was this, and you know what? Lo and behold, boom, they had no worries. Then so I'm using story to address all the concerns you have, the challenges you have with and it's proof of where you're going to get to, of where I want you to get to, like that end destination. But I'm just using story instead of data to back it up. And that just resonates with people more. And so through that one quick little example, what did I do? I made it about a real person. I gave a name. I gave a voice to him. You know, like I gave it a description. This little guy he used to say these things to me all the time. And he said, you know what, Ron, I got a problem with this. And so I've made it real. And then I walk you down the journey that this person has gone on. And there's always the light bulb moment. There's the light bulb moment, which is surrounded by a beat, silence, as my friend Trevor Curry calls it, the power pause, right? And then, lo and behold, beat, pause. You know, he was satisfied. It was a eureka moment. He got the thing he wanted to get, like whatever that is. So there's a way to tell story and to write story and to shoot story, so you can walk people down that emotional journey, which
it's amazing how, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, it's like, I understand who this is. I relate to this person. I'm intrigued by the challenge that they've been on. There's a surprise of something that I didn't occur. And whoa, I'm happy and fulfilled. And now I'm driven to say, like, how can I live that story?
And so for people, I always see, like, I see presentations, and the ones, like, oftentimes I see great presentations, they start off with a story, or they're using stories all the time, right? Woven through the whole thing. And I saw this presentation of this guy. He was in the army, had some army story. It was awesome, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I'm like just some kid. I grew up in, Midtown Toronto. I wasn't in the army, but the thing that I do is I tell other people's stories. Why would I limit stories to my own experience when there are stories of the billions of people who have lived on this earth? I basically write down all these stories so that I can draw upon them for a presentation or whatever I need it for, right? And I think you kind of do that same thing. Is that right?
100%. Yeah. I'm always looking for, there's still nothing more powerful than, oh, wow, I've never heard that before. So there are stories that, make the rounds. We're like, oh, everyone's talking about that story.
Yeah. But the good news is that most people don't read a lot. So if you're grabbing stuff from some book and, you think that, oh, other people know the story, I promise you, 99% of the people that you're presenting to won't know that story. Now,
Yeah,
if it's
that's
a
right.
Steve Jobs thing or something, sure, right?
Yeah.
But if it's some obscure story that you read in a business book, I guarantee you nobody's going to know it.
Yeah. In fact, in the promotion for my book,
Yeah.
I did a video. It was just a montage of people clapping and applauding and dancing. And it was like, finally, a business book that doesn't mention Apple even once.
Right.
And I didn't mention Apple because it's not cliche, but it's like, yeah, they're a $2 trillion, whatever they are now. Yeah. Everyone looks to them, as we should, for examples. But I just thought, I just wanted it all to be completely unique.
Yeah.
And so I didn't share any Apple stories. But I think if you can make them unique, that they haven't heard them before, or make them really ownable, like, as in speaking, we have a signature story, right? The signature story, which is what story are you known for? And I would probably know for a kind of Air Canada lost luggage, or for the Weston Grand shampoo story. And both of those stories, nobody else can tell because they happened to me. Mm-hmm. Now, the difference is they happened to me. I'm not telling a story about the thing I did to build church and state, which is a lot of speakers do, which is like, let me tell you about the massive success that I've had. Mm-hmm. Really? Really? They just saw Chris Hadfield speak before you. He went to space, right? So we got to limit the stories that speak about our success and that make us the hero. But we need to dial up the stories that feature us where other people are the hero. Mm-hmm. Because nobody else can tell those stories. And it often makes us human. And it's like, hey, I'm like you. I'm out there experiencing things, and I buy stuff, and I have interactions, and I had this thing happen to me.
It's back to the comedy thing. We're making an observation. I think that some of the stuff that I've seen had the most engagement is when, for me, and I say engagement like on a post or whatever, is hey, some person messaged me on Twitter and this is how they handled the sales opportunity. And here's what the problem was with it. And here's how they could have done better. People love that shit. Yeah. Right. Versus exactly. Oh, let me tell you the story of, Thomas Edison, who failed 1,000 times to build the light bulb. That's okay, but it's not as good. Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And the same thing will happen with quotes. I had this happen where, the number of people who've used the Maya Angelou quote, people won't remember what you said. Yeah. Don't remember what, how you made them feel.
Everyone's used it. You haven't done anything unless you've used that once.
No, yeah. So I made a joke. I was in a speech at Smucker's in Ohio.
Yeah.
And I was the opening keynote. And I made a joke that said, hey, all you need to be a philosopher these days is an Instagram account and a Maya Angelou quote. Mm-hmm. Right. And I said that. And then following me was the executive creative director of the global agency that did the work for Smucker's. And clearly this person, he was a really nice guy, but he hadn't seen the deck. Somebody else had done the deck for him, and he was just up there to present this deck. And he, like, the first slide, he doesn't even know. And he goes, and he turns around and it's a Maya Angelou quote.
Oh, right?
and I felt horrible because I never want to, I want to be professional about it and respect all the other speakers and stuff.
Yeah, of course. Do your own deck, guys.
Do your own deck.
Do your own deck. I've seen that too. Do your own deck. Know your slides. Know what's coming up next. You should always know what the next slide is. You got to know your story.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And there's a way of seeing it and kind of going, that's right, I'm a philosopher, or something to save it. Mm-hmm. But he was so embarrassed by it. He just got caught a little flat-footed, and it didn't look great. And I didn't like that.
Improv gives you that. It's hard to be so quick on your feet,
Yeah, exactly.
Especially when you're feeling you're in front of a few hundred people, you're feeling embarrassed. But the best, I mean, oftentimes you just got to call it like it is. And self-deprecation, it can elicit empathy from the audience too. Let's talk about book recommendations. What are your most recommended books or gifted books to other people?
I really, so in terms of like the stuff that fundamentally changed me, like I think like, you know, Daniel Pink's A Whole New Mind, which was from at least 10 years, 11, 12, maybe 12 years ago or something, even more than that, was the first book. And I was like, oh man, this is so good. Because it
Is that
just
what it's called? A Whole New Mind?
A Whole New Mind. Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
And it just you know, it's kind of like it kind of, you think about the precursor of AI and stuff, but it was like, hey, if you do a job that can be outsourced or automated, then your skills aren't going to be as valued as much. And it was the first time we're like, oh yeah, there's power in creativity and insight and all that. So that's kind of one. You know, my good friend Mitch Joel, 6 Pixels of Separation and Control Alt Delete, like those two, where it kind of brings, Mitch really brings kind of, you know, would say he's not a futurist, he's a realist, you know, like this is what's happening right now when he wrote those books. But it was like, it was this integration of technology and innovation and social and disruption and all those things, and how those were changing brand experiences along the way. I think in the current day, there's, it's here on my desk, The Man Who Broke Capitalism by David Gellis, really kind of speaks to how we elevated thinkers, CEOs in this shareholder primacy era. And Jack Welch, who I had the pleasure of interviewing probably 10 years ago, you know, we made him CEO of the century because he valued, you know, he prioritized shareholder value, and how that era is completely dead. We're in the purpose era now. And then I'll just very quickly.
We're in the purpose era? We're in the purpose era.
We're in the purpose era. Yeah, that's where if you focus on purpose, an indirect benefit of focusing on purpose is shareholder value, but it's the focus is completely different.
Yeah.
And I'll just, 3 friends have books that just came out that that are all in the middle of kind of consuming, but I know they love them as thinkers. So Never Lose an Employee by Joey Coleman, How to Work with Almost Everyone by Michael Bungay Stanier, and Employalty, which is right here, by Joe Mull, who's a great guy out of Pittsburgh. So those are kind of 3 books that have just come out lately that all 3 of those people are wonderful thinkers.
Love it. Love it. I'm going to check out some of those for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we're at the, I think we're at the conclusion of our great chat. Where can people find you, Ron, if they want to see what you're up to?
The easiest place is follow me on LinkedIn, you know, Tite. I produce a lot of stuff there, engage a lot there, but you know, if you're looking for web stuff, it's rontite.com or churchstate.com.
Okay, awesome. Well, thanks so much, Ron.
Thanks, Ryan.